8 basic watercolor techniques in under 8 minutes? Yep, I'm getting my paints nice and juicy, making a few puddles of color, and getting my brush ready to go. So grab your paints or just watch along and let's dive in. First up, a flat wash. Nothing fancy, just an even layer of color across the paper. Keep your paint nice and juicy and your brush moving for a smooth, consistent color. Next up is wet on wet, which is exactly what it sounds like. Wet paint onto wet paper. So first, I'm covering this whole area with clean water. You want to get the paper nice and wet, but you don't need big puddles of water sitting on the surface. And once I get that wet base, here comes the fun part. I'm dropping in several different blues and letting water do some of the work for me. Just watch how those colors start moving toward each other, mingling and blending right there on the paper. I'm not trying to control every little thing. I'm giving the watercolor some room to do what watercolor does. And I can even tilt the paper and let gravity get involved. So look at those blues move and swirl around. Sometimes, I guess, you just gotta go with the flow. Now let's flip it and try wet on dry. I'm still using wet watercolor, but this time it's going directly onto dry paper. I'm starting with a yellow circle and then maybe a few strokes around it. Yep, pretty much the way we all learned to paint a sun in kindergarten. But it's perfect for showing you the difference. The paint stays where I put it instead of spreading and wandering around like it did on the wet paper. And those crisp, defined edges are exactly what make wet on dry so useful when you want more control. Next is gradient, where we gradually move from darker color to lighter. So I'm starting with a nice rich stripe of purple, then instead of picking up more paint, I'm adding water to my brush and using up the color that's already there. Watch how the purple gets lighter and lighter as I go until it almost disappears. For dry brush, we're doing pretty much what the name suggests. I've got paint on my brush, but very little water. As I drag it lightly across the dry paper, it creates a great broken texture. And this can be super useful for suggesting things like wood or mountainsides or a sparkling surface of water without having to paint every single detail. So let the brush texture do it for you. For lifting, I'm starting by laying down a nice rich layer of green. And while that paint is still wet, I can come back in with a clean, thirsty brush to pick up some of that pigment. You just rinse your brush, blot off the excess water, and gently lift. Or you could grab a paper towel and dab. You'll see that lifts color right off the paper too. Lifting is great for creating highlights or softening an area or even rescuing something that didn't go quite as planned. Next up is resist. You can create a resist with masking fluid, a white crayon, even rubber cement, but I'm using a plain old white candle. I'm using the butt end of it like a pencil here to just write a word. It's completely invisible on the paper, even to me. But just watch what happens when I start to watercolor over it. Well, hi there! The wax resists the paint, leaving the white of the paper underneath. That's resist. And finally, scumbling. One of my favorite techniques and a really funny word, but I kind of think of it as pointillism for watercolorists. Instead of carefully painting individual shapes, I'm using lots of loose little dabs and irregular marks to build up color and texture. So here I'm scumbling in some red paint. I'm just making these loose red marks to create the illusion of flowers. And for another idea, I'm scumbling the shape of a pine cone. I'm using 2 different shades of brown and I'm building up with all those irregular marks, changing the color here and there, and letting the texture create that illusion of all those overlapping pieces. I definitely don't want to draw or paint every single one of those scales on a pine cone. Whoa, that would make me insane. Now I'm going back in to scumble some green around those red scumbles to create the illusion of all that foliage. And well, my red paint was still wet, so some of my green is bleeding right into it. That's watercolor for you. Sometimes it does exactly what it wants to do, but we keep going. So you can scumble red flowers, green foliage, brown pine cones, or whatever you want. That's what makes these techniques so useful. Once you know them, you can start spotting all kinds of places to use them in your own paintings. And there you have it, 8 watercolor techniques you can use in all kinds of ways and in way under 8 minutes. So try them, combine them, play with them. Most importantly, just keep painting.